Good morning. This is our second class together. And today, hopefully, you have your pigments, your tray, and your boards all ready. And what I'm going to do is make a few suggestions, and then I'm going to give you a demo. I suggest that you pick something that you can use as a reference, like a reference photo, something you can quasi-copy. It gives you a guideline for just playing in the pigments, so that you're not out there floundering going, what should I do, what should I do? It causes too much anxiety. These are all very abstract, and this part of our class together is really just to experiment with the paints, just to find out what they can do, what they like to do, what their tendency is. Here you see a couple of samples from earlier students. This was a really good one because it shows you a little bit more about how we're going to do this. This is not done with one layer, this is done with several layers. So, let's get started. I prepared a board. Hopefully that all of you will experiment and create a board similar to this. I don't care about the size necessarily, but just make it so you have enough space to work with. I've got 3 samples. This one I used a piece of plastic, but this is how they look when they're dry. So right now I'm going to go over each one and show you how I got that effect. Here I have my paints mixed. First I'm going to do the red one. These are 2 pigments. It's a red with a lot of sand in it. When I say sand, I mean these pigments aren't ground really fine, perfectly. They are sandy. They are the earth. They are particles that you're pushing around with a small brush. What's revealed when you tip it, or when you make them thin, is the character of the paint. Now, this is dry, and this is wet. Oops, that happened. But you'll want to tip your board slightly to make it move around evenly. If you want it thin in one area, maybe you'd like it thin in it, very thin, in which case just let it run out the bottom. Now that doesn't look very interesting right now, but as you can see, it's beginning to dry even now, and it's taking on the shape of the earth, like 2 marble stones that have been on the earth for years and years and years. You get to be the witness of how you lay them down on your board, and then you get to be the witness of how they dry. And hopefully you'll get to see how creation was made. You are the creator. It has been created, and it's here with all of its potential. Let's try another one. So now I'd like to try the green one. This sample here, done in a different way. I'm adding a lot of egg yolk to my pigment because it was too dry. Well, it dried while we were working before. A little bit of water maybe. Again, I'm going to make a square. My objective here is to get to this particular style. If you look at it carefully, you can see there's a little tiny white rim that goes around each little piece. It's fabulous and exciting. I think you'll be surprised at how this happens. I discovered it quite by accident. I was just sitting around my studio one day and I thought, boy, this flat color is kind of boring. So I turned around and I picked up a piece of plastic, crumpled it all up tiny, and then I laid it on the egg tempera. And then the phone rang, and when I came back and I took the piece of plastic off, I had this incredible pattern I've never shared it with anybody in my 30 years of painting, but today you guys get to be the recipients of it. Now, I'm not going to pull that up immediately. Like I said, the phone rang when I came back. It had dried enough. In the meantime, I'm going to go on to this. Normally when I teach, I have 30 hours to convey a small idea to somebody. A concept of God. A tiny meditation. Remember when I said don't use big brushes? Well, today I'm going to use a big brush just to help you guys go along and not take up too much time. This needs more pigment. Now, that's a good thing to notice while you're working. To get that effect, I'm going to need more pigment in my paint, which means there are more sand granules in each brush stroke. If there aren't enough, you won't be able to get that effect. You want to lay it on nice and even, if you can. And I'm going to tip it just slightly to even it out like we did in the first demo. A little dry spot right there. I don't like that. I'm trying to get rid of it. You think, well, you could use your finger or the brush. You cannot. Part of this whole technique of egg tempera is leaving things the way they are. I mentioned God, and it seems like all of us are trying very hard to be more God, but in part we're working with God. So you have to kind of leave, just leave God alone and let God be what God is, and you just participate in the potential that God has given you. So you'll be surprised at this, but here we go. Isn't that fun? Little tiny explosions, little explosions of being touched by the finger of God. Now, if I keep going, something else seems to happen, depending on how deep the paint is, depending on how dry my finger is. When I've asked you to do these experiments on your own, this is the kind of experimenting you'll want to do. Try and figure out how it best works. Sometimes it's too much liquid, sometimes it's too much pigment. Anyway, here it's dry enough, I think. So I'd rather have it dry a little bit more. Oh, see, it's not quite dry enough for this experiment. But if we had let it dry, it would have come out exactly like that. So have a nice day. If you do that, you could take it off, and I'll show this to you next week. One thing I want to show you how I use it in my own work. I'll be curious to see how you all do with your individual sample boards, applying one layer on top of another layer and seeing how your colors progress and how the application is done. There's a great amount of diversity that can be found in egg tempera. I encourage you to post your pictures so that I can see them and so we can share them with one another. And we'll all learn a lot more about the limits of this. And I don't think there are any limits. I think the color, the texture, the way they dry, all contributes to beautiful painting. Look at that tiny little detail right there. Well, I hope we see you next week. Enjoy your work. Bye.